I only understood Tom de Bruyne and pudding, something like that. So thank you. So what I'm going to do is I want to talk about the behaviors of high performance teams. But what I really want to do is to talk about manipulation. That's much more fun. I would say the reason why I want to talk about manipulation is that's because that's my job. I'm a behavioral designer, which means that my job is to use the science of influence, use behavioral psychology to influence minds and shape behavior. And the problem with the word manipulation, of course, is that it got a bit of a bad name. It got a bit of a bad reputation. And I think the reason why the word manipulation has such a bad reputation is that, of course, when we think about manipulation, we think about tech companies, we think about politicians who, do a pretty good job in, exploiting our deepest fears, our deepest emotions, and our deepest desires. They manipulate our thoughts and our beliefs and our emotions. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can use exactly the same kind of science, to design positive behaviors. Like you can use the science of influence to manipulate people into eating healthier, or lose weight, or save more, or invest more, or be more productive, or more creative, etc. Now, you all work in HR, and I think that the essence of an HR professional is to, attract, retain, and excite employees, excite talent. And I think if you're really good at your job, you're probably really good in manipulation. You're kind of good in manipulating teams, manipulating people in a company to perform certain behaviors. Well, it turns out that if you want to turn an average team or an average group of people into a high performance team, what you really want to do is there's a couple of very, very specific behaviors that differentiate a high performance team from just an average team. And that's what I want to explore. So what I did is I want to share 4 principles. 4 principles, well actually there's 3, that is already, this messes things up. But I want to explore 3 principles, and the first one that I want to explore is when behavioral science or when behavioral design thinking goes wrong. And I think that we need to take one step back. Now we need to understand that most problems in organizations really can be attributed to a very bad understanding of how people actually think, of how our brain works, of how our mind works. And I think that the reason is that many people in organizations, definitely people in boardrooms or who lead governmental departments, they are kind of rational people, and they have this very rational idea of people in mind, and they design processes, they design structures in companies with these rational people in mind. The problem is, of course, that these people don't exist at all. There's a psychologist called Daniel Kahneman, really the godfather of behavioral economics, behavioral science. Every book after Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman is kind of, pays tribute to that book. And Kahneman at a certain point said, there's 2 kinds of people. Well, there's actually another person who said, there's 2 kinds of people in the world, those who divide the world in 2 kinds of people and those who don't. Kahneman made a different distinction. So there's 2 kinds of people, there's econs and there's humans. Econs are non-existing humans that only live inside the head of managers and inside economic theory. And these people are smart, they are rational, they make cost-benefit analysis and act in pure self-interest. They think economic and think things through. Well, he said these people just don't exist. What we're really dealing with is humans. And humans are biased, they are prejudiced, they are emotional, they are irrational, they are social, their desire to be loved is much higher than their desire to be rational. They are lazy, they hate thinking too hard because they get insecure from it, and they take all kinds of shortcuts. That's what we're really dealing with. We're dealing with humans. And so I really want to make that distinction, because there's a big difference between designing an organization with econs in mind versus designing an organization when you take humans in mind. So when you take econs in mind, you get the idea that the more you reward people, the higher the output. Turns out this is a completely crappy idea. They're not true. That The essence of managing is all about optimizing the machine, making the company more efficient. And as you all know, the more efficient the company gets, the more you just want to kill yourself. When you have this econ view of the workforce in your mind, you also think that hierarchy is good because hierarchy allows you to scale. And the simple idea is the more A players you find, the better the company will become. Well, it turns out that these are all deep, deep illusions. When you design with econs or with humans in mind, you kind of take into account that these humans that just populate your workforce, they have a deep need for recognition, for belonging, for competition. They bring all kinds of neuroses into the company, power struggles, status anxiety. They're terrified of losing status, so they don't act because the fear of losing status is much bigger than the desire to win status. If there's a bit of risk involved. They bring in love, they bring in hate, they are completely emotional. And men are probably even worse than women. The women is just, you see it on the surface, but men play games because they are driven by irrational emotions. So I want to illustrate this with two kind of spectacular examples. You probably remember, you might remember Enron, those of you who are a little bit older. Enron was, before the financial crisis, was the biggest bankruptcy in the world around 2000, I think 2001. And before the company went bankrupt, they were praised and hailed as the most innovative, successful poster child company in America. Year after year, they were chosen by Forbes magazine as the most innovative company in America. And their CEO was hailed for being very innovative in thinking about human resources. And he came up with this brilliant system called rank and yang. And so what is rank and yang? His whole idea was, if I design a system in which you reward the top 25 performers with a bonus every quarter, and you just sack you sack the bottom 25% performers, get them away out of the company, this will kind of create this drive for performance in the company. That's a very stupid econ kind of idea. Everyone loved it. But what happened? Everything was being measured, but what happened was that everyone working in that company that was thinking that they were kind of doing good, they were manipulating the numbers. Because they thought, hey, if I manipulate them a little bit, I might be a top 25 performer. Everyone who was afraid that he or she was doing bad, they were also manipulating the numbers, because they wanted to avoid to be part of the bottom 25%. And so what happened when the company went bankrupt? Well, it was about, I think, $1.8 billion of fraud that was hidden in the organization, and suddenly it came to the surface. So the story here is that it was a company designed typically by older people in suits with a very econ mindset, and the humans, they kind of rigged the system. They said, oh, if this is the game, let's play it. This is precisely what happened in 2008 when when the world economy crashed and the financial crisis. And there's a Dutch anthropologist called Joris Luijendijk who went to London with an interesting hypothesis in mind. And he went to London to interview investment bankers because his hypothesis was that these must be sociopaths. And so he interviewed them. He's an anthropologist, so he thought, let's explore that hypothesis. And he interviewed them, and he quickly discovered that these people, most of them turned out not to be sociopaths at all. Were regular people with regular lives, regular dreams. But what he learned was the following, was that all these people, they all had the feeling and the pride, and their emotional pride of being admitted to like the Champions League game of finance. If you work in investment banker, that means you have engaged in the Champions League of finance. So they got a lot of pride from them. Then the second thing is that they, the system with which they operated was if your investment paid off, you get an obscene bonus. But if your investment fails, then you won't get any punishment because it's not your money, it's your client's money. And if your client can't pick up the bill in the end because your investment completely failed, then society will pick up the bill. If you design a system in which you can only win, well, you kind of have created a system in which everyone is highly motivated and incentivized to become a gambler. And that's exactly what happened. These people were highly incentivized to take incredible risks because there was no downsides for taking risks. And I thought it was a beautiful illustration again of how a system that was designed with a very equal mindset, if we reward these Champions League players with big bonuses, they will do the right thing. Well, it turns out that they don't do the right thing. They are irrational, and they perfectly understood that if this is the carrot and the carrot is gold, I will go and do everything to get the carrot. So this brings me to the topic of bonuses. Bonuses are a fun topic to study as a behavioral economist or as a behavioral designer, because most bonuses suck. And there are a couple of reasons why big bonuses. There's a lot of study, and I just quickly point out four interesting ideas. First of all, there's a negative correlation between the size of the bonus and the quality of the work. In other words, the higher the bonus, the more stupid behavior people do to get that bonus. Second is, it also turns out that the more you enter a bonus for behavior that people actually love, the more it will kill their intrinsic motivation. Because in the end, something like, for instance, being a CEO in a company, from a psychological perspective, this is kind of the thing that most boys or girls ever dreamt of, to become that. To have this role could be incredibly motivating. There's a lot of meaning, there's a lot of purpose, you get a lot of social connection, you get a lot of adventure. Everything that makes up for a happy life is potentially being, that you could get that in that job. But we somehow have collectively thought that it would be probably a great idea if we would give these people exuberant bonuses. Well, it turns out that these people only get obsessed with bonus anymore. And this brings me to my third problem. I call it the Ronaldo problem. Most of you probably have heard of the football player Ronaldo, the second best football player in the world. I don't know on which sides you are. This is a room full of women, so what am I thinking? Well, he's at least he's the best-looking football player of Messi and Ronaldo. So the problem with Ronaldo was that he was really being seen as on the same level as Messi, as the best football player in the world, playing for the most prestigious football club in the world. By that time, he had already 700 million euros of money on the bank, and yet he was incredibly unhappy with Real Madrid. And the only reason why he was so unhappy with Real Madrid and wanted to leave was because he couldn't bear the thought that Messi made more money than him. That felt like a deep sense of disrespect to Ronaldo. So this happens with all CEOs and with all CEO bonuses. The size of the bonus is irrelevant. The size relative to what other people get, that's what we are really obsessed with. If a fellow board member or CEO gets a bigger bonus, that means that the company doesn't appreciate me as much as my fellow competitor. And then the last one I think is a very fascinating phenomenon is Goodhart's law. Goodhart's law says that every metric that becomes a KPI loses value as a metric. And I want to illustrate this with the Cobra problem. The Cobra problem was I think it was in the city of Mumbai. They had every city has its own problems. I absolutely adore Belgrade, but you have a taxi driver problem. I arrived last night pretty late at night, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But to have to go into a negotiation with Belgrade in taxi driver, that was spectacular. I thought, yeah, this is cool. Anyway, in Mumbai they have a different problem: cobras. Apparently there's too many cobras. So the government came up with an incentive system to get rid of the cobras. They paid people to bring dead cobras to a certain point. So what happened? People started to create cobra farms to raise cobras. Because there was a business model there. And then when the government realized that they had a perverse incentive to actually create more cobras, they stopped the incentive, and then people released all the cobras in the street, and the problem tenfold. So my first point is there's so much bad understanding of human behavior in organizations, and I think that behavioral scientists, behavioral designers really should play a much more, or psychologists and people who understand human decision making should play a more important role in how we design organizations, and how we design incentive systems. So I'll get very concrete and tangible about what could be much more better solutions. First one is of my three solution principles is that high performance teams fulfill deepest needs and psychological needs of people. And I think thinking outside in really is the biggest superpower in psychology. Thinking inside out is thinking, I have an employee, I need to figure out how to convince and persuade him or her to do things. Thinking outside in is radically different. That is, this person here in my company has certain needs, certain deeper needs, certain emotions. How can we as a company help them to fulfill those needs so that they become creative, productive, etc. That's outside-in thinking. So, I think that women by nature are much more, although I really learned a new word, I don't know if she's still here, the empathetic fatigue. I immediately did text to my wife, oh my god, that's me! I love that presentation. So you can be very empathetic with what people really need, but there's this quote underneath that says, influence is judo, not karate. I think the implicit idea that we have about influence is that we need to convince people, we need to persuade them, we need to feed them and crush them with arguments, and in the end that will change their behavior. Now, every one of you who is in a relationship knows that this doesn't work at all. The harder you try to convince someone, the more they get into defense mode. Because challenging beliefs and convictions is really is attacking someone's identity. So we don't want that. Judo is much more working with the forces that are at play. And so turns out that people bring certain needs into the company. And happy people or productive people or high performance teams really cater very well to those needs. And some of them are incredibly important. First and foremost, and the most important one is people want recognition. People want to belong to a group. People want a bit of challenge and adventure. But these are already on a secondary level. They want appreciation. Recognition and appreciation is the main psychological driver that people want. If someone is nearing a burnout in an organization or is deeply unhappy, then it always has to do with these forces. They don't feel the recognition, they don't feel belonging, they don't feel appreciation. And there's some fascinating experiments with, that Google came up with, and I actually tried them in my own company as well. Google, at certain moment, Google measures everything, not only in our life, but also in the lives of their employees. And so they did a big project called Project Aristotle, in which they tried to uncover, what is the DNA of high performance teams, or what are the behaviors, the HR behaviors that foster high performance culture. And one of the things they discovered was, it started as a little experiment, but it completely exploded, was variable rewards. Now, experiential bonuses, not variable reward, experiential bonuses. Well, they actually are variable rewards. So what happens with experiential bonuses is that a manager could at any time use quite a good budget to reward people unexpectedly for hard work and the extra mile. So you could go with the credit card to your employees and say, look, you've been working all week, you spent nights, you spent evenings here to finish the job. I know you couldn't be with your partner, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever. I really, really appreciate that. We see what you were doing. So here's the credit card, go to Disneyland with your boyfriend this weekend, it's on us. Or go to a restaurant and have dinner, it's on us. This is like heroin to the brains, because it signals appreciation. A bonus doesn't signal appreciation, it just signals a financial bonus. It just signals that you achieved a target that is relevant for the company. But if you do a small thing like this, you signal appreciation. We know, we see, that you see, that we see, that you see, that we have seen, that you were doing an amazing job and we want to thank you for that. Here's my token of appreciation. I have done that many times with my stuff. Actually, I had one girl, she took the money, I went with her boyfriend to a strip joint in Amsterdam. I said, yeah, sure, why not? I had to figure out something to, when I gave the ticket to the accountant, he was happy. So, turns out that the same project, I mean, Project Aristotle, really, if you're in HR, read, there's also a book, it's a little bit outdated, and on the other hand not, by a guy called Laszlo Bock. He was the former HR vice president of Google, called Work Rules. That was his book, brilliant book. And one of the things they explored was, what differentiates a great team or a high-performance team from a team that is just average. And they are Google, so they tried everything. A team with diversity, a team with seniors and juniors, a team that is friends with each other or not, half men, half women. They tested all variables. Well, it turns out that there's only two variables that really mattered. High-performance teams differentiated from average team by behavior. And those behaviors, that were behaviors that created psychological safety. There was in high-performance teams, everyone had equal speaking time, and in high-performance teams, the team was quite sensitive to emotion. So if you weren't feeling well, or if there was tension in the room, the team immediately stopped and addressed it. And in that kind of culture, in that kind of context, a team really feels completely safe to perform and to go the extra mile. So I would say that's a bit the theoretical part, the more hard psychological stuff. My last two principles are much more concrete, tangible, playful. So high-performance teams design interventions to find and stay focused. And again, my favorite character is Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movies, because a guy going this is like, it's evil but yet not. So one of the key principles of behavioral science is that ability eats motivation for breakfast. When you want to change behaviors, you basically have two strategies. You can try to boost motivation, you can try to motivate people into the desired behavior, or you can make the desired behavior easier to perform. And it turns out that ability eats motivation for breakfast. If you can find ways to make desired behavior easy or even automatic, or if you can find ways to make undesired behavior impossible, then behavioral change, that really is a super powerful behavioral change. So, because the problem, of course, with behavior in organization, or with productive behavior in organization, is that it demands so much of us. We get a training, and then we learn the rules, but then we forget them, and we're not disciplined, and we're not super athletes. So only super athletes thrive on discipline and thrive on on discipline, and other humans are just always distracted, tired, etc. So if you say to people, you need to do this, they might do it once, but then they forget again, because there's 17,000 other decisions that are literally, there's 17,000 decisions during the day that are being presented to our periphery. So I want to first give you, this has nothing to do with work, but it's illustrate this principle of ability, make desired behavior easy. If you want people to cook healthy, why don't you already make it easy for them to cook healthy or combining all the ingredients they need to make a dish? That is already making it a little bit easier to do desired behavior. This is Mirte. I must confess, I absolutely hate working out. It's dreadful to me. And but when my wife and I, who's also my co-founder, when we were getting married 3 years ago, we kind of felt that we had a little bit too much weight, and when the pictures were, you were envisioning yourself in the pictures, and then panic strikes. So we need to go work out. Yeah, but we are behavioral designers. It doesn't work. We can't work out. So I thought, okay, let's see if we can make ability work for us. So we hired Mirte, and she came to our house 3 times a week, 8 o'clock in the morning. At that time, we had a 2-year-old daughter. She didn't sleep at all, so we were completely broken and exhausted. 5 minutes before 8 o'clock, the alarm would go. No, she's going to be here at 5. I hate her. I hate myself. I hate this life. But we did it. We did it because this is what we call a forcing function. You create a function in which you can't escape from the desired behavior. And so forcing function Mirka was incredibly convincing because there was no escape, we had to do it. And every time before we had to do it, we hated it, and afterwards we were very, very happy that we designed this forcing function for ourselves in our life. You can do that with productivity as well. So for instance, block 2 hours of me time in your agenda and call it meeting with management. Because if you don't do that, everyone in your company, whether it be your PA or your colleagues, will overrule that appointment. They always do. Because if it's not in your agenda, you're free to override it. Well, create a forcing function for you to take me time, to take reading time, to take inspiration time. There's also this big misunderstanding that if you want to be productive and creative, you need to throw as many hours as possible to the problem. That's absolutely bonkers. What really works is that the more time you spend just getting your head in play mode and roaming mode and sucking up inspiration, the more you will have the creative fuel to come up with really good ideas. And a forcing function could also be change the defaults of meetings. This sounds trivial, but it has transformed my life. When I do meetings, I only do 30 or 45-minute meetings, not a full hour. The simple truth is that we book full-hour meetings because Outlook just makes it very easy to book a full hour. But that's just insane. And you can get days saved by having 5 meetings and still have the 15 minutes in between time. Yeah. And also as a team, decide as a team to schedule fixed time slots. Meetings are only between 12 and 3, and the other time is used for creativity or productivity. Notifications are Satan. Every time your work is distracted by a notification, a cute kitten will die a horrible death. Turns out there's interesting psychological research around everything, but there's some interesting psychological research around what smartphone notifications do to your brain. And the problem, of course, is that every time you try to focus and you try to get in deep work mode, because that's what you're paid for. You're all knowledge workers and professionals. So you are being paid for your creativity, for your talent, for your ability to solve problems. Well, every time you try to get into deep work mode to become creative and to solve problems, but you let yourself distracted by your smartphone, you need to start all over again. There's this saying that says creativity is ideas having sex. Which means that creativity really is ideas inside your head that find the time to suddenly connect. An innovative, creative idea is always a connection between 2 or 3 other ideas. And to get in that modus, you first need to upload those insights and puzzle pieces inside your head. Every time you get interrupted, you not only have to start all over again, but your IQ also drops with 20 to 30% for about 15 minutes. So your best life-saving strategy is to get rid of all notifications in your smartphones. They are deliberately designed to hijack our attention, to hijack our emotions. There's always this promise, this reward behind it. This is going to be a fun message from my loved one. Am I going to be seen? Am I going to be appreciated? They tap into our deepest psychological needs. And for instance, I killed all social media apps and notifications on my smartphone except for WhatsApp, and I'm trying to convince everyone now to go to Signal, but that's a different story. But I disabled the notifications, and it really, really helps you to get into deep work mode. I think also that there's something that drives me nuts, is that young people think that in a meeting they can perfectly work with being present in the meeting and being present on the smartphone. Maybe I'm old, but I get completely aggressive from that. So, I'm old. Email is also one of those spectacular problems that we as professionals need to solve. Cal Newport, a great thinker on this subject, coined Parkinson law, which says that the more emails you answer, the more mails you will get. You get into this perpetuum mobile of answering more emails, getting more emails, and getting completely exhausted. We are now phasing out email and have switched to Trello. And Trello is kind of brilliant because it reverses the process. Trello you can use, for instance, I have a sales Trello, I have a management Trello, I have a project Trello. And so what Trello does is that it gets the team towards a shared space where you see tasks, where you see progress, where we have discussions with each other. So we don't have emails anymore. We go to the same space and do the tasks that are there for us to do. And we sit together once a week to see if things are going quite well. Oh yeah, Pomodoro. Whom of you is familiar with Pomodoro? A couple of people. Try it. It's mind-blowing. What is Pomodoro? Well, it kind of is a simple app that it's free. You can also download a plugin for your browser, or you can use it. It's named after these tomato, clocks, and you time it to tomato timers for 25, 20 to 30 minutes. So what happens when you do a Pomodoro is that you decide for 25 minutes to work on a specific task without distraction. And after 25 minutes, you reward yourself with a cigarette, with social media, with going to the coffee machine. Only for 5 minutes, it times the 5 minutes, and then you go to another 25-minute sprint. By doing that, you create a context in which you're getting into deep work mode without being distracted becomes achievable, because it's only 25 minutes. And we are actually completely addicted, because when I do a Pomodoro, I literally sometimes feel the desire to grab my phone and to watch messages or whatever. But you're able to cope with it because you see the 5 minutes after these 25 as your reward for completing it. Well, it turns out that if I do 4 Pomodoros in a row, if I really have to work hard on a concentrated task, if I do 4 Pomodoros in a row, so that's 4 times 25 minutes, I have done more work than I would do on a normal day. It's incredibly powerful. At the 3rd round, you'll get in such a deep work mode that you forget the whole world around you. And you basically get into play mode, which makes us very, very happy. So the problem, of course, is that if you stick to all these habits, to all these rules, then there's only a tiny problem, and that's your team. Because they kind of interrupt that, with, running over your agenda, interrupting you in the office, etc. So I think that for these interventions, because these are all behavioral interventions, to be successful and to work, you should try them on a team level, and see if you can make them work on a team level. Which brings me to my last principle: success habits. Habits are like the royal route to behavioral change. And I think that people working in talent management and HR should think hard about building success habits in companies, or be the inspirator of success habits in a company. So, why is changing habits so difficult? Well, the problem is that our identity is basically informed by the behaviors that we repeat. There's some, again, fascinating thinking in psychology. That there's 2 kind of schools in psychology. One is that you have this personality, and there's a second school that says basically your personality is just a coping strategy. It's a very dynamic thing. The person you were 10 years ago is not the person you are today, and who you are today is not the person you will be in 10 years. We tend to think it's called the end of history illusion, is that the person we are today will be the person we will always be, but that turns out that this is not true. But the problem is that if you want to change habits, we kind of feel that as a threat, because they are part of who we are, who we interact with the world. And more importantly, our habits are deeply triggered by our context. Our behavior is deeply triggered by the context in which we are. So if you want to radically change your behavior, lose weight, work out, eat healthy, but you have a family around you and they just hate eating healthy, they serve you a glass of wine the moment you come home out of pure love, well, try to stick to your habits, try to break that habit. It's impossible. One guy who works at my company said, me and my wife tried to turn vegetarian and eat healthy, but they have 3 boys, and those 3 boys just harassed them psychologically for 2 weeks and they gave up. So it was impossible. So we talk a lot about culture in organizations, and culture is this very flickle thing. What is a culture and how do you change it? Well, I think a very pragmatic definition of what is a culture is that a culture is nothing more than the sum of behaviors, the sum of habits. A culture is nothing more than the behaviors and habits that an organization encourages, that become part of the automatic operating system of an organization. A culture is also, I heard another definition that I really like. A culture, how is it again? A culture is the behaviors that people perform when other people are not looking. I like that. A culture is also what we see when people get away with shit. If you see in an organization, despite all the cultural mantras and the big stories, that someone gets away with behavior and is not being punished for that, then that's the thing we will remember about culture. But a great way to think about building culture is to install habits. And to install tiny habits, small habits. Do we have habits that make it automatic to address problems, or to celebrate success, or to give constructive feedback? What if we could turn feedback giving into something that we automatically do after every behavior, after every meeting, sorry. If giving feedback is an automatic thing that a team does after every meeting, then giving feedback becomes something just like saying hello. It doesn't become threatening anymore. It just becomes, that's just something we always do. And so I want to share a couple of the success habits that we introduced in our team that really made an incredible difference. The stand-up, which is every day at 8 o'clock in the morning we have a stand-up. We're now doing virtual, or half virtual, half live, just to check in to see who needs help, to check in if everyone's okay. Only 5 minutes, but we can see, everyone can see if someone's in trouble or not, and if there's an opportunity to help. The checkout is so small, so stupid, and so powerful. So what is a checkout? Is every time after a meeting, I ask the question, okay, now that we've finished the meeting, tell me one positive thing about the meeting and one thing that we could have done better. By asking the question, one thing that we could have done better, what you basically do is you invite people to give constructive feedback. If you ask the question, what was a bad thing we did, nobody will answer, because they don't want to offend you. But if you invite them to make a suggestion on what could have we done better next time, and you do a quick round, you quickly learn a lot. And what you do as a manager is you also signal to everyone in the room that you're very much open to feedback. Again, our brain works in this way. It's sometimes the small behaviors that really make a great impression. If you are vulnerable in that room and you say, okay, what went well, what could have we done better? And you do that all the time, people feel very, very comfortable to give you feedback. And I get a lot of dreadful feedback, very constructive feedback, which I absolutely love. So the retrospective, that was a complete game changer. About 5 years ago in my company, we had 2 big teams, 5 people in each team. One team was thriving, one team was crashing. I mean, crashing, they were crying all the time, they hated each other, every meeting went wrong, etc., etc. And I didn't realize at the time, in the team where things went wrong, I had the person who was kind of the informal leader of that team, I thought she was amazing, because she was good at what she did. Clients ran away with her, they loved her, and she felt that all other people in her team were just freeloaders, not talented enough. She was deeply frustrated. And I didn't realize how much at that time she was just destroying the culture in that team. And then I had the second team, and there was one guy in the team who stood up, we read somewhere a book, and he said, I want to become the facilitator of the retrospective. And everyone went, okay, cool, what's it? Well, he said, I want to organize a bi-weekly meeting on Friday afternoon, in which we as a group will sit together and prepare it, and we'll sit together around 4 questions. What do I think that I did very well in the last 2 weeks? What do I think that I could have done better? What do I think that you did really well last week? And what do I think that you could have done better? First 2 times, it was war. People were crying because suddenly, you know, the things came to the surface that were that were never addressed before. But they stick to it. And after 2 or 3 weeks, they felt that the psychological context for safety was created, and then they went relentless to give each other feedback. So it was sometimes mind-blowing to see that even in a meeting, they just went, oh, what you did wrong was this, and you should have done this, and they went, oh yeah, thank you, that's a good one, really. So, wow. I remember that it was on Friday afternoons when they were having their retrospective, and I was ready for, you know, the Friday afternoon drink. And I just sat there on my own waiting, and they just went on and went on, and I eventually had to go home. Because they got addicted to improvement. And that really is the key. If you can install a simple habit that first creates that triggers feedback behavior, but it does it in a repetitive way, then people get addicted to the feedback. They get addicted to growing and learning as a team. And once they feel secure, they constantly want more feedback. It's absolutely amazing what happened with that team. They just went off and thrived, and the other one, we had to euthanize it. The fuck it, let's do it, my favorite one. How much time do we have? Okay, quickly. The fuck it, let's do it is a monthly experiment based on the psychology of happiness. And it turns out that if you study the psychology of happiness, happiness is also the product of behaviors and habits. So if you can find the success behaviors that lead to happiness and you perform those behaviors, you will have a much happier life. Well, it turns out there's one behavior that kind of trumps them all, that all other behaviors follow from that one behavior. And that one behavior is curiosity. Turns out that curious people, the people who explore their curiosity and who are not in a judgmental mode, but who explore their curiosity, they learn new things. We get very happy by learning new things. They meet new people. We get very, very happy by connecting. They make progress. They get into flow. All these, things that are associated with happiness simply follow from pursuing your curiosity. The Fuck It, Let's Do It is a monthly experiment in which we explore things that we always were curious about. So last month my wife did a DJ course because she loves techno, so she wanted to learn if she loved doing, working with how do you call it, the DJ equipment. We always dreamt of what would it like to live abroad. So we thought, fuck it, let's do it. Let's do an experiment and see what it does. So the first experiment we did was we went in the Christmas holiday. We went to Tagazout, which is a place near in Morocco, near the Atlantic coast. But we quickly learned that it was a failed experiment because we had a 2-year-old or 3-year-old with us at the time, and she thought, that's amazing. Mommy and daddy went for me for 2 weeks near the beach in a hotel. That's awesome. So we learned that this doesn't work at all for us because you couldn't work, you couldn't focus, etc. We tried a new experiment a year later with spending a month abroad during the summer holiday, and it kind of worked better because there was opportunity to work, there was opportunity to run the country by Zoom and by Teams, and that kind of worked better. So the whole idea with the Fuck It, Let's Do It is that you prototype your dreams. You set up little experiments and see what they do. There's one thing that you shouldn't do, and it is cheating on your partner and call it prototyping. Yeah, don't do that. Don't call it prototyping. It's bad. Yeah. So this whole culture of building habits in which people get obsessed with learning, with growing, with getting feedback, etc., is all about optimization. It's all about being obsessed with designing behavior in such a way that it leads to more happy, more creative, more productive people. Jeff Bezos at Amazon is obsessed with that. One of the things two of the things he designed is a two pizza teams rule. Teams should never be bigger than a group that can be fed with 2 pizzas when they work late at night. The 6-page memo is actually brilliant. He has forbidden PowerPoint presentations. So if a group needs to discuss a strategy or a document, people are forced to produce a 6-page demo. And when a group needs to decide upon a 6-page memo, not a demo. When the group needs to think about it and discuss it, they first have a study room setting in which they read the document, make all kinds of notes, then ask questions, and then have a good decision. If you are forced to write down a strategy, not in a PowerPoint, but in a Word document, you will think much harder to have a good build-up, a good setup. And the thing that I'm most in love with is working in sprints. That's also, I think, a great behavioral design I would say, behavioral design from at work. that really shapes people's behavior. We always work in sprints. Reason why, if you don't work in sprints, there's a couple of, I would say, enemies of progress. One is switching cost. If you first have one group do one task, then they brief a second group and then a third group, then there's so much that gets lost in between. There's really this watering down of intelligence and insight when you hand it over to other people, and when there's too much time between the insights that you get and the creative output that you produce. If you get interrupted with 2 or 3 projects that you do at the same time, every project will suffer from distraction by the other projects. So we always work in dedicated sprints, and the same people do the sprints to avoid switching costs, to avoid the fact that lots of get lost in the handing over. There's also a lot of expert bias. We tend to believe that since we are paid as professionals, we tend to think that we should act like experts, even though we have no clue what we are talking about. Because we kind of feel, I'm paid to be an expert, so I must have an opinion on that. That's highly problematic. And one of I think the beautiful things of running sprints is that you always create prototypes. You come up with a small version of what you want to do and then test it. If you prototype everything, then you get rid of expert biases, because even if an expert says, I think it should be this, I always go, great, let's prototype it. And then it turns out that usually they are wrong, but then you get evidence that what they think was the right strategy is wrong, and you created a context in which you create room for alternative ideas, sometimes for the more inconvenient ideas. And it definitely challenges groupthink, by the way. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Tom, for an interesting presentation. Now we can take a look at the questions. Do we have questions? Questions and answers. Let's see the questions. Okay, the first question is, are we actually in the rat race by constantly setting and looking to surpass the higher performances in business?
Yes. Yes, we are. And I think that, by the way, if you don't find a job in Serbia, we are screaming in the Netherlands for talented people. Not just in my company, but all over the Netherlands. There's really, the situation in the Netherlands is exactly the opposite as probably here, probably a couple of years ago. So the big question everyone is now facing, how can we keep our employees happy and motivated enough? And by only focusing on performance, that's definitely a highway to burnout. But with high performance, I really mean a group that just gets into play mode and gets into problem solution mode and gets into creative mode. And we love working. We even love working long days to be part of those groups. That being said, I absolutely love the idea of the 4-day work week. I also love the idea of the 4-hour work week, but I'm not there yet. But 4-day work week is a brilliant idea. And I actually called my wife, who did the presentation? Is still here? Oh, it's not here, okay. I called my wife about it and I said, why don't we do that? And she said, and I said, but the guy who did the presentation, he said, yeah, but actually it was one of your questions. One of the questions was, yeah, but then people will work 10 hours per day during those 4 days. And she said, yeah, but if you get a day extra in the week, it doesn't matter if you work 10 hours. And if you really enjoy being part of a creative group and you get a lot of fun by creative problem solving, one of the highest boosters of happiness, then, so don't focus too much on just the performance. It's the high performance team behavior.
Okay, thank you. I think Seng has also a question for you. How to motivate yourself to change habits and to be persistent in it?
Well, again, the question is not how to motivate yourself. The question is to find a way to manipulate yourself into the behavior and create mechanisms so that you can't escape from it anymore. Like with the personal trainer. That's really the only way to make it work. One other mechanism is accountability. So, for instance, if you want to start running and you hate running, but you really want to do a 10K, first of all, assign someone as your accountability partner. Could be someone who would be running with you, makes it a lot easier to run. Second thing is, put a little money at stake and say to that person, if I'm not able to do 5K in 5 weeks, then you will get the money, or you can give it to a charity that I absolutely hate. And by creating these accountability mechanisms, you might boost your motivation a little bit more to actually do it.
Okay, and now I have the last question. If my superior does not see and does not recognize my realization, what is the best way to ask or approach him or change this situation to work for me?
Great question. There's probably an abstract answer, so forgive me for that. I think that you need to figure out how to manipulate your superior, and you can do that by outside-in thinking. So once you start to realize that your superior also has these deeper needs for success, for appreciation, for recognition. By the way, I'm a trained psychologist, I'm a psychoanalyst. There's a great rule of thumb. The more aggressive and abusive your superior is, the more there's deep insecurity underneath. Because people who feel very self-confident and secure don't find the necessity to bully other people. It's a great shortcut in life. So if you have an abusive superior, try to completely not be intimidated by it. That makes them very, very uncomfortable. And before you know it, they will do everything to start to become your friend because they can't bear the idea that you're not intimidated by them. That being said, it's just a life hack, if you will. That being said, I think that our superiors also have deeper needs and goals. They are afraid of the board, of being seen as the one who made bad investment. They want recognition. They are insecure and they want to, they are stressed out and they want success. If you can have a good conversation and you can bring those emotions to the surface and you can then have a conversation, how can I help you to be more successful? Then they will love you totally. Because that's exactly what they want, the same thing as you want. They want to be seen, they want to be helped, and they want to be successful.
Oi, gospodin Bruyne. Thank you very much.